The Louisville Forum is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public issues group that was founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Our meetings always take place on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant here in downtown Louisville. For more information on the Louisville Forum, we encourage you to go to our website, louisvilleforum.org. And now for our topic today, attack of the drones. When we were looking at this topic, attack of the drones, I was thinking it'd be nice to have the music from Star Wars kind of come up into the room. But in keeping with Star Wars, I'll start off by saying once upon a time in a land far, far away, in a galaxy far, far away, a drone was simply a bee, or it was a male wasp, or it was a male ant. Or it could be applied to a continuous musical chord or a note, or even to a public speaker who drones on and on and on, which I promise you will not happen today. Because today we're talking about drones, also known as unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, which were primarily developed for military applications. Over time, they progressed from high-altitude reconnaissance platforms to sophisticated aerial vehicles able to deliver lethal ordnance. Military drones were designed as slow-moving, pilotless aircraft equipped with cameras, listening devices, and air-to-ground missiles. They can hover over their target for several hours, transmitting video feed of the scene below and then striking their targets suddenly. Military-grade drones like the Predator and the Reaper can be flown by remote control from great distances. Pilots steer them and fire missiles while sitting before video monitors. Conducting a mission over Pakistan, a pilot might be at a base near Afghanistan, or they may even be as far away as Nevada, striking a target on the other side of the world. Several years ago, drones made the transition from military to more commercial uses. UAVs have been used for domestic police work in the United States, where dozens of police forces have applied for permits. UAVs have also been used by U.S. Customs and Border Protection since 2005, and the FBI stated in 2013 that they own or use UAVs or drones for purposes of surveillance, which of course strikes a note of concern with privacy advocates. Drone videos and other information can be invaluable in disaster relief or to aid fire departments fighting large blazes. UAVs are gaining popularity with power companies and other utilities, including businesses, conservationists, and farmers who use drones for crop dusting, which is cheaper than using a helicopter. A quick scan online reveals that, yes, you too can get a drone today. For the prices range anywhere from $60 up to $1,800 for a professional-grade drone. It seems very quickly the public has been inundated with the latest craze, which presents a challenge to commercial aviation and privacy advocates. Yes, drones are filling our skies before our eyes, used by commercial interests and also by hobbyists, but a lot of folks is also raising a lot of concerns, especially amongst commercial airline pilots. In the United States, the Federal Aviation Association regulations generally permit hobbyist drone use when they're flown below 400 feet and within the operator's line of vision. However, on March 2014, earlier this year, a U.S. Airways flight almost collided with a drone, and you can imagine the catastrophic effects of an airliner sucking a drone into its engine when it's coming in for a landing. Borrowing a pizza delivery model from a large online retail giant recently told Congress in June of this year that they are developing technology to use drones to deliver a package in 30 minutes or less, which will be a broad expansion of unmanned flight that is raising concerns about safety, security, and privacy, which again brings us to our topic today, attack of the drones. Our first speaker today on this topic is Henry G. Lackey. He is the Deputy Commissioner for the Kentucky Department of Aviation. Mr. Lackey is the former mayor of Henderson, Kentucky, and his current position allows him opportunities to travel around Kentucky, telling and sharing the story of general aviation and how it's important for economic development. Henry has stated, most people don't realize how significant aviation is in the life of a community or a region. Periodically, he makes presentations on some of the do's and don'ts for new and not so new pilots who could fly into one of the 65 airports within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. His department manages all fixed-wing aircraft for the governor's office and the state police, while also being responsible for providing a safe and secure air transportation system. Without further ado, our first speaker, Henry G. Lackey.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and on behalf of Governor Steve Beshear, it's an honor to be with the Louisville Forum this afternoon. I came in here about 11 o'clock, and I asked the fellow, someone fell out here at the desk, I said, "Where's the Louisville Forum meeting?" He says, "It's right down there between those double doors, but you don't want to go. Some bureaucrat from Frankfurt's going to be talking about paper airplanes." That's really not too far a stretch, because someone's already developed a paper drone, okay? So it's just wild and crazy. It is the Wild West. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I want to give a special recognition to David Ray, who is with us today, who was a former Secret Service, worked at the White House under many different presidents. We appreciate your service. Yeah, and also Ed Statz is here. Ed and I had the privilege to work together. My background's in the broadcasting business. That's how I got to know Ed Henson. So it's good to be with them as well. Let me just first give you the difference between the Kentucky Department of Aviation and the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA licenses all pilots, they license all aircraft, and they handle 90+% of the traffic across this country. So what do we do at the KDA? As already been mentioned, we oversee 54 general aviation airports in the state. What is a general aviation airport? Elizabethtown, Hardinsburg, Frankfurt, Henderson, Madisonville, Hopkinsville, and many others. Those are general aviation airports. Whereas Standiford Field is a Part 139 under the FAA's rules, and we have very, very little dealing with Standiford or Bluegrass or Greater Cincinnati or Paducah or Owensboro. So that's the difference. I just want to lay that out to you. You've already heard the many uses for drones, traffic reports, measuring fires, both in a municipality and forest, observing power lines, police activities, so forth and so on. But there are a lot of misuses of drones too, and you're going to find out. Our state representative probably has more answers than I do, but you're going to find out there are a lot more questions than there are answers to this subject matter. But some of the misuses, as you probably have already heard, interfering with air traffic, spying on neighbors, hunting, hindering emergency helicopters from performing their duties, terrorism. I know that Mr. Ray and I talked about that before this meeting started, and he has a great interest in that, along with all particular agencies in the federal government that protect our country. Now, the FAA, Ed and I were in the broadcasting business, and we dealt with the FCC almost on a daily basis. And they always got a lot of flack from a lot of broadcasters, just like the FAA gets a lot of flack from folks who fly, either out of Standiford or out of one of the general aviation airports. I think they have done a yeoman's job by trying to slow this thing down on rules and regs, because it's changing, not daily, but about every 3 or 4 hours. The FAA came forth with a proposed rulemaking back many months ago, and they were supposed to have it out last month, the final rulemaking. Now they say it'll be the first quarter of 2016, and maybe further than that. But let me just hit some of the highlights that most likely will be in that final rulemaking. The drones must weigh less than 55 pounds. Now, there's some talk that once they get this out, they'll come back and take a look at ones under 4.4 pounds. They may only operate during standard daylight hours and within visual sight. Must fly no higher than 500 feet and go no faster than 100 miles per hour. Must be operated by a person at least 17 years of age or older that has passed an FAA knowledge test. I'm not quite sure what that is. I happen to be an instrument pilot myself. Must be registered but does not require an airworthiness certificate for the aircraft. Those are the basic 5 things that the FAA is looking at, plus many others that they'll come forth with hopefully around the first quarter of next year. a lot of the concerns, the U.S. Congress and the FAA, along with some state legislatures, about 27 across this country, have passed or considered some resolutions or laws, plus many municipalities. I think Louisville is taking a look at that. This morning it was announced that Lexington is giving up on that, and they're going to allow the states or the feds to set the rules and guidelines. The technology for such things to really make these things safe, things are known as transponders. It's a 4-digit code going all the way up to 7700, which is the emergency frequency for all aircraft, and what is called TCAS, which is a traffic collision avoidance system, where the airplanes can detect somebody 12 miles away. It's the one you hear in the movies, traffic, 2 o'clock, high. Well, these things are so, the technology hasn't moved along to put them on a drone that weighs 12 pounds. So it's considerably further down the road if we even go in that direction. The next problem is I feel sorry for the folks, the men and women working as air traffic controllers at Stanford Field. You got about 60 of these things up flying around, and then you got your regular air traffic coming in. So there are a lot of questions. Let me just throw out a stat to you. How am I doing on time? 1 minute left. In the United States, there are 250,000 roughly licensed aircraft. In England, there are about 21,000. 250,000 to 21,000. There are about 5,400 airports in the United States of America, and there are roughly 1,800 in England. In Japan, there are 98 airports. Now, the reason I throw those stats out there, the United States Congress is putting such a heavy burden on the FAA to come out with these rules, and they don't think about the fact that we have so much more traffic congestion, particularly in the Northeast corridor from Philadelphia, New York, Washington, all those major cities. So they're trying to put together a realistic but effective restrictions on where drones can fly and who can fly them and for what purpose. My time is about out, and I have more to add, and maybe some of your questions will get to that. In particular, the 2 different types of drone operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry. Our next speaker is State Representative Diane St. Ange, who has filed a bill to prohibit law enforcement agencies from using drones to gather evidence without a warrant. She has been serving the 63rd District, which includes part of Boone and Clinton counties, since 2013. Diane serves on several committees, and she's the Vice President of the Committee on Transportation, Licensing, Occupation, and State Government, which handles numerous matters, including aviation and airports. She's also a practicing attorney. We were chatting before, not sure when you get time in to do that. But without further ado, without further delay, please welcome Representative St. Ange.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Forum for having us here today. This is such an important issue, and it's come to local attention, state attention, national attention this last couple of years in particular. So thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to meet you again, or to see you. Thank you for the updates on the FAA. That's always very interesting to see where we're progressing along on that. So this legislation on drones came to the whole issue on drones came to my attention from a number of different sources, from business folks, from those who are interested in privacy issues, and from pilots. I have a private pilot's license. It's not current. Haven't done my 3 takeoff and landings lately, so there is a wide variety of folks who are interested in this, and we have no parameters by which to guide those who are using drones or those of us who have drones being encroaching perhaps on our property from the privacy rights issue. So I put together with our staff sort of a compilation of what other states have done, and also talked with our folks here in Kentucky to make sure that we could have an initial bill out there that would give us these guidelines. Very important to do so, we felt. This is a bipartisan effort because people, it knows no side, no political affiliation. It's something something which is filling a gap for a legislation that we actually don't have anything, and which we believe that needs to have some parameters. And I'm not usually one for more regulation, but in this particular case, for a variety of reasons, I think it's essential, and if not crucial, that we have this forward. So this is the third year that this bill has been filed. It's been pre-filed for the 2016 session. It is House Bill 197. And basically what House Bill 197 does in these guidelines, what it presents is for law enforcement to use a drone, they need to have a search warrant issued by a judge first, except for in exigent circumstances when it's imperative that a drone be used immediately, because, for example, it could be helping an abducted child. We could be tracking this down and bring in the location of where this person is so that our law enforcement, whom I support very much, can locate this person. And so in those cases where they need to send out a drone immediately, they would have 48 hours to come back to the judge and present why they needed to do this, and the judge would then issue a search warrant. And so then any evidence that would be taken from this could then be used in a court of law. If the judge denies the search warrant, and those search warrants, as you know, are very particular in nature, and if it's in the judge's wisdom that this did not meet the standards of search warrant, then he or she would deny the search warrant. Then you cannot use any of that information in a court of law, in a proceeding, in a hearing, anything of that nature. So it protects law enforcement as well, because they know exactly what they need to do to be able to use this. So that's on the law enforcement side. We also wanted to make sure that with this advanced technology that we allowed for very positive uses as well. So for business purposes, we are in the bill are advocating for the use of this if it's for legitimate business purposes. So agriculture comes to mind, and I believe you had mentioned agriculture earlier. In agriculture, let's say, for example, you have 2,000 acres and you want to check the back fence line, or you want to check the crops to see what's going on there, or cattle, or whatever you might need to do. You would be able to fly a drone out to check this and collect this information for yourself and for that purpose. That would be considered a legitimate business purpose. Now, if, for example, your property was separated by a highway or another piece of property, and you have to go from point A to point B, anything that you might cross over in the meantime between A and B that is not your property, any information from that you would not be able to use in a court of law or an administrative proceeding. You could not collect that because that is not the legitimate purpose of your business. So that's the tie-in there. As for educational purposes, the UK, Louisville, a number of universities and other schools are looking into how they can use drones, how they can advance drones, and those of you in high schools probably are very interested in this. And I know that at Northern Kentucky University we have an informatics center, and drones, and not that drones are being looked into, although they might be, I might not just be aware of it. We need to make sure that they can be using this for educational purposes, for research purposes. So this initial bill is really just something that is being put out there. As with all bills on down the road, it can be modified as new information comes in, as technology advances. But it's a stab at trying to protect rights, trying to give law enforcement their legal perspective that they need for this, and advocate for businesses and educational purposes as well. And as I said, it has a tremendous bipartisan support on this. We're hoping that it will be heard in committee this year and get to the floor for a vote. Interestingly enough, and a lot of what I'll be talking, and I won't be using the entire time probably here because it'll probably be more in the format of the questions and answers. But you know, we've had these incidences now where drones have interfered with fixed-wing aircraft, and there is concern for that, tremendous concern for that. In addition to that, you know, we're concerned about I just saw my 1 minute, so my mind went blank. I've got about 45 seconds left here. So that was the basic purpose of this bill. But just quickly, I am pre-filing another bill, probably this week or next week, which is a sort of a companion bill to the drone bill. which protects privacy rights for individuals. So this looked at law enforcement. Privacy rights for individuals would be someone who's flying across, I'm going across your property and I'm spying on you while you're having a picnic in the background. And basically that is looking we're putting that under harassment bills. I can talk about more of that if you have questions on that. But that is what the purpose of this bill is, and I think it's an important bill and one which we need to get moving and get passed in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Anj. I appreciate that. There's your timer. At this point, I'd like to ask our board members to collect questions. I'd like for you to tee up a question from Eastern and a question from Ballard, if you can. And I'd like to I apologize for taking you off your track a moment ago, Representative Anj. So I'd like to ask you a question to kind of elaborate on the trespassing part. And before I do that, I'd like to also say welcome to Lisa this morning. She's your incoming president and our vice president for the Louisville Forum. We were talking about privacy and about trespassing. There was a case here in Louisville where a gentleman a few months ago over in the Highview area, a drone was flying over his backyard. His wife and his daughter were out there. He went inside. He got his shotgun with number 8 bird shot, and he blew it out of the sky. He said it was trespassing. The gentleman who owns it said he owes him $1,800 for shooting down his drone. So in terms of a classification of trespassing, what are your thoughts on that?
Is this on?
Yes, ma'am. It is. Go ahead.
Pull it out. And it's interesting that you brought that particular one up. I want you all to know I was headed to the West Coast, and I arrived on the West Coast, which is where I actually went to undergraduate school in this Bay Area of San Francisco. And that was the image that we had in the papers of this this particular incident that you were talking about. So that was the first thing that folks there were asking me about. Yeah, this is exactly why this companion bill, which we still have to nail down a few definitions in there, is we felt was best suited to go under a harassment bill. Under harassment, it would be if you are annoying or annoying someone, and they felt that they were being intentionally, bothered, then it would fall under the classification. The first time would be a violation, second time would be a misdemeanor A, and third and subsequent offenses would be misdemeanor B. We will be narrowing down that, and I should probably hold off to speak to that at another point in time till it's actually filed, but it would address something like this, and it would have to be proven what did this person do, and a court of law would take that into consideration, and they would make that judgment.
Very good. Thank you. Going by alpha order, do we have a question from Ballard?
Yes, we do.
Please.
Currently, there is no minimum altitude for a drone to remain within safe limits of a residence. How can we regulate the airspace to provide privacy and security for private residences while still integrating into society and/or the workforce the use of drones? And this could be for either or both panel members.
Well, let me just follow up on what the representative said. Remember, I mentioned about 27 states, and you talking about a wide area of bills and resolutions. For example, California sent one to the governor's desk that would make it illegal to fly a drone within 350 feet of the ground over private property without consent. A rule that's opposed, obviously, by technology companies such as Amazon and Google. There is no immediate answer to that question. In fact, there are those that argue that state legislatures, and I used to be a state senator here, don't have any control because all the airspace is regulated by the FAA. All airspace.
And just to follow up on that, it was once thought that you owned the property rights of your home on up into the skies, and I think that was 1936 ruling. There was a change on that with the Supreme Court that said that, in fact, you did not. This 500 feet that we have so far is, that's sort of what the guidelines are going to be for someone operating a drone. But I would agree with what you say.
And then a question from Easter. If drones were to be readily available to ordinary citizens, what parameters would you recommend to set for those who could buy and/or utilize those drones, as far as, I guess, ownership requirements? Or
Let me start on that. China's making 80,000 drones a month, and most of them are being sold in this country. But this Christmas, there'll be an additional 1 million drones sold in this country. And there's two classifications, the use of drone. One is for the hobbyist, and most likely the rules will be like the remote-controlled aircraft rules that have been around for a long time. The other type of use of drones is by the commercial industry, and those rules will be much stricter. One of the basic rules is you cannot operate a drone within 5 nautical miles from the center of the airport. That's just categorically out of the picture. And also the FAA now is saying, in order to get a waiver to be able to operate that drone for commercial uses, you've got to talk to the nearest airport. For example, we have a company that, I think it's the first in the state of Kentucky, that just has gotten the waiver to operate a commercial operation between Frankfurt and Lexington. So not only do they have to get Bluegrass Airport's approval, they have to get Frankfurt General Aviation Airport's approval. And we can set even stricter guidelines.
And so we are waiting for FAA's regulations to come out on that. They are the governing body on this. In the meantime, and also in conjunction with that, we hope that this will address some of the other issues as well, as far as the private use of drone. The commercial use of drone, yes, you have to apply to the FAA for permission to use that. There are very few that are granted, and to date, this being one of the exceptions.
Next question, Greg Condra.
Yeah. This has been a theme through several questions, so we'll kind of make an amalgam of several here. So the FAA has some rules for the commercial operation, and we're hearing on the private side you still need to somehow be certified or something, but it's not a pilot's license, right? Okay. So a lot of people have picked up on they're not hearing any requirements that this be insured against damage. And what are the penalties if they don't get this FAA certification?
Well, the most classic case happened last week. A drone company was flying 66 missions over Chicago and New York. Now, that's called Class B airspace. Class A is everything above 17,000 feet. Okay, Class B is like Greater Cincinnati, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, so forth. Here, this is Class C airspace. And these people even put on their website saying that they got the 333 exemption. And the FAA never heard of them. That's extremely dangerous operation. And I want to clarify one thing. There are no hard and fast rules. I said in my comments, rulemaking procedure is still going on. All the comments have been filed for it. Now the FAA is trying to take everybody's thoughts in mind and come out with the actual hard rules.
So to be clear right now, if somebody wants to go out and buy a drone and be what we call a bad actor, there's no penalty. And there's no insurance requirement, there's no penalty if I'm not registered.
The FAA doesn't get into insurance requirement. They don't require me to have insurance on my airplane.
Mm.
And this bill does not address the insurance issue. It is, this being such a new field, there are so many, and I'm sure a lot of you have different questions about different scenarios. There are so many areas that it has not addressed. It's a first attempt to get something out there and address the private use of this, as well as not so much the commercial use, because at least that's a little bit more regulated with licenses with the FAA, but more of the. But it's an excellent point, and it was brought to my attention about 3 weeks ago. What about the insurance? What about if it falls in the sky and hits someone on the head, which is always a possibility. So it's an excellent point, and I'm sure something which will be addressed in the future.
Mr. Lackey, the other question for you from the FAA standpoint is if commercial aviation pilots, if they're already complaining about crowded airspace, and if you have package companies saying they want to use the same airspace to deliver packages, does that not continue to pose a threat to general and commercial aviation? Does it not increase the probability of a problem?
Oh, no doubt. And the ones who are most concerned are helicopter pilots. because they fly in that 300 or 400 feet range. And we had a helicopter that encountered something. This fellow had flown in Afghanistan, he'd flown in Iraq, had thousands of hours of helicopter flying, and he flies power lines. And about 2 weeks ago, something hit his and knocked the whole front windshield out. And he said, every time I've ever hit a bird or buzzard or an owl, there's always blood and feathers. There was nothing.
Wow. And helicopter, you're talking about 555 pounds, 5,500 pounds of weight, 130 pounds of high-octane aviation fuel, which then poses a problem when it hits the ground in a neighborhood.
Well, Mr. Ray, sitting right over here, his concern is like all the other federal agencies that deal with security. What would keep somebody like, if you don't think the people, the terrorists aren't watching this story closely, what would keep them to buying a 55-pound drone and hook, what is it, C4, is that what the explosive is? Something like that on one.
Right.
I mean, it will be a missile is what it'll be. And I submit to you, someone is going to get killed or certainly seriously injured, whether it be an airliner or my airplane or a helicopter, or they just bomb something.
Sure.
And that is not beyond the realm of possibility at all. You know, one of the things I did not mention in this bill is it allows for the military to use this, have a lethal payload on the drone for their purposes. My son is a helicopter pilot in Afghanistan, and I know how important it is for the military to be able to have this. And so that was one of the provisions we wanted to make absolutely clear in the bill, that the military could use this. Security issues, national security issues, terrorist issues, you know, it's there, it's very conceivable. So we need to be very cognizant of that.
Next question, Tom.
And there's a number of questions I think that kind of play into this theme that we have, and it's for both of our panelists, and that is, we have bills that address the use of drones by law enforcement in the state, and those have been proposed and adopted in many other states. Will law enforcement be able to utilize drones that are armed under current legislation proposed, that are armed with lethal or non-lethal means? And if so, what exactly would be done to regulate that use?
Well, this bill addresses the fact that law enforcement can use these, but they may not, at the moment, have a lethal payload. The only exception to carrying a lethal payload is the military, all branches of the military.
I don't think they will ever be approved unless it is the military. It will not be approved, in my opinion, for police departments, because of the problem of remote control access to it. If that malfunctions, what would keep the gun from malfunctioning?
That makes sense. Next question, please, Greg.
Yeah. Again, smashing together several questions. I would say about a third of these folks want to be able to shoot down the drone over their head. So kind of keep that in mind when you're talking about airspace rights and legislation. But then also there's the issue of just, you know, say it's not a privacy issue, but it's a nuisance issue. So you've got an Amazon or a Domino's or somebody, and they decided that the most convenient flight path from their distribution center to your neighborhood is always over your backyard. And it's noisy and distracting, and you don't know if they're spying on you or not, but you know that there's one going over there every hour, and you don't like it. So can we talk about that?
Well, and that's a great question. There are pathways that are used, for lack of a better word, that are used for fixed wing, for any type of aircraft to go from one place to another. And so if this is on a pathway to the legitimate business purpose, dropping off that Domino's at your home, and it crosses over this table's homes on the way to get there, on the one question, you cannot collect information on that. And if you do, first of all, you certainly can't use any biometric information on all these folks here. If you're dropping that off at your home, passing over their home, anything you do collect cannot be used. Now, the nuisance issue is one which in this separate bill that is to be filed is one we looked at. Should we do a nuisance? Should we do harassment? But it's very, very difficult, as the attorneys in this room will know, to prove a nuisance case. The harassment is aimed more at a bad actor situation that was brought out earlier, and yet still taking into consideration that we have children who are practicing their drones, and they'll fly them over your home, and you don't want to penalize the child for doing that, of course. So it's sort of a compromise, and it was the best one we could find at the moment.
Comment on that?
Well, even the commercial operations must have a pilot and must have an observer. And it must be within, I'm sorry, a little choked up, must be in line of sight at all times. Now, down the road, they're already developing ways that it does not have to be line of sight, but that's an example of how this thing is changing almost monthly.
I guess, in terms of privacy questions, how would the FAA conceivably regulate airspace above your house in terms of someone violating it? I mean, is that not kind of a moving target, or is it easily defined?
Well, the whole subject matter is. There's not enough regulators in Washington, D.C., with all the agencies, including the Secret Service, to be able to monitor all the drones. My advice to your child is if he gets one for his birthday or her for Christmas, I'd go to some farm over in Bullitt County that is 5 miles away from the airport and operate that thing under 300 feet. Now, that brings up another problem. How do you know what 300 feet is? Is that 300? Is that 500? As a pilot, I can tell you, I don't know if that cloud over there is 1,000 feet from me or 2,500 feet.
Good point. Next question, please. Tom?
There's a number of questions about, there's obviously a wide range of the type of drones that are in use or proposed to be used. And is there any proposed differentiation in the rules between large drones that are mainly be commercial or perhaps used by a civil entity, and the kind of drones that someone would buy a child or something? You obviously have a wide range of drones that could be anything from a foot big to something that could be, I guess, 20 to 100 feet long at least. Is there any differentiation in the rules that you would propose or that you think is coming up at any point in time?
Well, the latest understanding is it's any drone or UAS that is 55 pounds or less. So you can't operate one larger than 55 pounds without getting special authorization from the FAA. And still, we don't know what that final rulemaking is going to be. They have the most difficult job to do things like you were talking about, flying over someone's backyard. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do it. I really don't.
There's no weight limits, restrictions or limitations in this bill. We're going by what what the FAA comes up with on that. But for the your radio-controlled folks, for that, those obviously are much lighter and much smaller. So at the moment, we didn't put any restrictions in that.
As we keep talking about weight, is that with or without a payload?
That's the total weight.
Total weight. Okay.
I'd like to go back to something Representative Onge said in your comments when you talked about, and also Mr. Lackey also referred to the possibility of terrorists using a drone to be able to strike at an event. Specifically, University of Kentucky last month, someone crashed a drone right into the center of the field during a game. You were there, you say. Well, what would have prevented that from having an ordinance on board, which could have inflicted mass casualty within that stadium?
Nothing. It's interesting, the person who was operating it was a third-year law student.
Yeah.
It's also interesting.
Dang those lawyers.
Yeah. The other thing is that the law enforcement folks in Fayette County couldn't figure out what to charge him with. So they charged him with second-degree wanton endangerment. Truth is, over every college, practically every college football field, large colleges, there is what the FAA calls a TFR. I know that the Secret Service will know. It's temporary flight restriction from ground all the way up to 3,000 feet above the ground. Now, I can fly my plane at 5,500 feet, as long as I'm talking to Lexington approach, over Commonwealth Stadium. But I cannot fly over that or NASCAR race or anything, Disney World, below 3,000 feet.
And on that was an excellent point that you brought up. Law enforcement doesn't know what to charge them with, which is why we're trying to come up with at least some type of a, statement as to what they could fall under. The gentleman who shot down the drone that you mentioned earlier. I don't know if any of you followed that, but he called my office actually, and he's very supportive of the bill. But when he was in court, they had a taping of the judge who was saying at one point she put her hands up and she said, "Well, this is just a problem that the legislature needs to address." And I said, yes, please let the legislature know that so that we can address that. But that's exactly the issue. No one knows what they can do with it, so this sets this in writing.
And if the legislature does come up with a ruling, how do you enforce it?
That's exactly right.
How do you enforce it?
Right.
Don't have enough people.
Correct.
Well, so building off of this, there's a theme in a lot of the questions. People want to go home today knowing what they can do or not do. And so the theme is, okay, if I have a drone hovering over my house and I don't want it there, and I think it might be photographing me or my family or my partner, whatever, what can they do about it?
Well,
So-
there is no drone legislation yet in this state. What they can do in that circumstance, if it falls under any of the statutes that we have in place for harassment or voyeurism or I'm trying to think of any of the other ones that might fall under. If they can prove that, then they could go along those lines to do that. But that's a very difficult process because the language written does not normally apply to something flying up overhead like a drone. So that's a hard call. You could try to do something. Certainly, if somebody were injured, or a building or something like that, I think you would have a stronger case. But to say that somebody's flying over your property and you're going to go after them, that's very difficult right now.
You can do that, but there brings another problem. Where's the operator of the drone? He may be 3 blocks away.
Yeah.
Good point.
How do you find them?
Representative Onge, just to kind of piggyback on that question, I realized in researching this topic, I was reading where the governor of California passed an anti-paparazzi law which prohibited drones from being able to hover over backyards, looking into bedrooms, violating peeping Tom, voyeurism, et cetera, et cetera. Is there something, is there pieces of that legislation which perhaps could be adopted in Kentucky to avoid people from feel like their rights are being intruded by peeping Tom or voyeurism?
Well, that would be in this bill, which will be pre-filed. And if you can look at it from the perspective of this being falling under the harassment statute, then they would be able to press charges against someone for doing that. But currently, unless you can show, again, what we had mentioned earlier, currently you don't really have anything to fall under.
Okay, good. Next question, please.
We've heard a lot of talk about what government is trying to do in order to regulate the use of drones. Has private industry, the drone industry, or anyone affiliated with their use undertaken any kind of voluntary self-regulation with the use of these devices, try to help monitor their use or make it more responsible?
Great question. I don't worry about those folks. I really don't. I worry about the fellow, the young girl or boy that doesn't know what the rules are at all. And to my knowledge, when you buy one of these things at Radio Shack, there's no explanation of where you can operate it. Yeah, you can fly it over Stanford Field. That's the safest place to have an airplane, which is true right in the middle of the night. If you're up 4,000 feet, the jets aren't going to take off and go right up and hit you. But the point is that there's very little education of those that are just buying it for fun. But the licensed operator, at least the one we're dealing with, and I'll look up their name here in just a minute. I think it's Unmanned Aviation out of Versailles. I don't worry as much about those, even though I just got through telling you about that $1.9 million fine over Chicago and New York. Those people are going to be punished severely and should be.
But isn't the bar fairly high for Section 333 from the FAA for non-commercial use of a drone? Is it fairly high? I mean, what's the process for getting that?
I don't think you can get a 333 on on non-commercial.
Okay. So only for commercial use?
That's correct.
Only?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Representative?
So that would be, it would fall under that commercial category if you've applied for that license and are doing that legally, and at least there you've got some restrictions. I am concerned about folks that would have that, because what if there is an abuse of that situation? You know, the more educated you are on drones, the 8-year-old may think it's just something to fly over and spy on their friend or something, but the more educated you are and the more intent you have to use the drones for one purpose or another, you then realize, well, then I could do this with it, or I could do this. And those out there kinds of things are the ones which we need to look at very carefully too, because the more sophisticated users could apply this for other purposes that we would not be in favor of.
Next question, please.
So I'm going to combine a couple here that focus on the device itself, the drone itself. So could there be some legislation, say in Kentucky, that any drone sold or operating here has some sort of a governor where it's just not going to go above 500 feet? You know, possibly. And then there's another one here on the airworthiness certificate. So I think people are thinking that has to do with the physical drone itself, and you know, is it worthy to fly? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Just like every aircraft has to have on board an airworthiness certificate.
And there's no requirement for that for drones now, but
In the rulemaking, I read the 5 or 6 things that they were, in fact, in that document filed over at Lexington and Frankfurt, it does have stipulation they must inspect the aircraft every so many hours or days or weeks. I think that'll be in the rules for those who use it as a commercial basis. Now, I want everybody to understand, the Kentucky Department of Aviation is not opposed to drones. We're only, just like the FAA, want to use them in a responsible way. You know, where it really got rolling was agriculture, you know, surveying crops. That's a great use for it. I mean, chances are a 1,000-acre field is not going to be too close to an airport down in Todd County. Okay?
so do we need to lobby the folks in Frankfurt to say Kentucky should require an airworthiness certificate?
I don't
Feds aren't
think.
going to do it?
The problem with that is you're going to have 50 states with different airworthiness certificates. It's, you know, and I don't want to steal the representative's thunder, but it's going to be an FAA matter. All this stuff is. It's got to be. And as I said, they don't have enough people to regulate it. What do you see somebody flying over your home and you haven't given them permission? Who are you going to call? The sheriff? He going to come out and shoot it down? Yeah, so you can bring civil action or criminal action against them. You got to capture them first.
I'd like to follow up on a point with Senator Onge in terms of privacy concerns in your legislation and the bill that you're proposing. When I was doing the research on drones, they talked about them having the capability to actually be able to look through, have infrared night vision, be able to also look through cloud cover, and be able to take pictures of actual real-time action on the ground. That really concerns a lot of folks who are concerned about privacy. So how does your bill address potential invasion of privacy?
Well, again, it very narrowly defines what an improper use would be for a drone from as a private individual. It does not specifically address that they cannot have, you know, ability to see this from a distance or any of the things that you had just mentioned. But it gets back to, if you are using that and using that in an improper way, i.e. by definition of the bill, then that's, you know, you could be called, there could be a cause of action that would arise against you if there's something that you can pinpoint to a cause of action. But you know, that goes as well to the bill which is filed, and if you have that capability on the drone, then that is not allowed. because you have to have a legitimate business purpose and/or this circumstances for law enforcement or firefighters, which, by the way, it's such an excellent use for firefighters out west where they're having tremendous problems with the wildfires. You want to save our first responders and be able to put a drone out there to look at this. I take issue only a little bit with the Federal Aviation, the comment on FAA, being the one which was, it is a governing body. But if the state doesn't come forward and say what the state needs to do to protect our rights, and we just sit there, then in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people, then the FAA isn't necessarily hearing all of all of the issues. And
I would wager the NCSL, the National Conference State Legislators, were probably one of those 4,000 or 5,000 letters that were sent to the FAA
Yes.
about the rules and regs.
Yes, and they did. They had, the NCSL had very big input into the FAA on that, and so we're hoping that is something which is a positive, but which comes through in the regulations. It still does not preclude, or should not preclude in my mind, the state from putting something which says this is what we will tolerate now, because who knows how long it's going to take for the FAA to come up with something. It's a slow-moving body and a difficult topic, as you said, and they need to look at a lot of different instances. We can focus more in on our private interests, our smaller interests, uses for commercial, uses for educational tools.
I did not answer your question about the height of it. The commercial operator, if they don't have it now, they soon will. I'm sure you've heard of geofencing. They will be equipped with that. So there won't be any question about, are they 5 miles from the Frankfurt airport? It won't allow them to go.
Can you explain geofencing? Because I'm sure not everybody knows.
Well, it's pretty much satellite driven. Same thing your GPS and your automobile, and you factor in, you put in the parameters of what your 333 allows you to do, and you cannot go into that area. There's no way you can override it to do that.
So who puts it in there? The operator?
No, yes.
So it's like a
So it's still
governor,
the
except
owner's
it's driven by the operator. So the operator would have to be, fair in what he was putting in there.
We have time for two more questions. I want to be fair for the record that we did have a speaker representing a business interest to talk about that side in terms of the commercial needs for drones, but unfortunately some situation came up where he was unable to join us this morning, and his backup wasn't able to join us either. So we want to make sure that we were trying to represent all balanced portions of this debate, which is important in the Louisville Forum. Next question, please.
This is a few questions put together. We've had a lot of questions about the negative use of drones. These are questions about the positive use of drones. And this for both panelists. Do either of you think that delivery services that have been proposed, and perhaps there will be more in the future, are those practical commercially from your viewpoint? And also, what would be perhaps some of the best uses or exciting uses of drones, positive uses in the future that you can foresee, and whether or not they'd be addressed by legislation?
Representative St. Onge talked about the forest fires out west, but you probably all heard about that story where some wild, crazy drone operator got in the way of the tankers that were putting fire retardant on. So what they do? They backed off. We're not going to fly in there with water or whatever. Let me just, someone raised the question about near misses. Last year, 2014, there were very few reports by the airlines of near misses. This year, these first 10 months or 9 months, there are now about 100 reports a month on drones flying perilously close to airplanes and airports.
So Representative Meeks filed a bill this last year, which I supported, and the bill passed. It was a bill which there are folks out there, believe it or not, who sit around with these red laser light things, and they like to shine them in things that are flying in the sky, like pilot's eyes in the cockpit. And it's, again, another legitimate concern. So he filed this bill to prevent that. Now, that actually, it's an FAA sort of regulated area, but he filed that. It was passed to protect that. It's the same situation with these drones, and these near misses are not, as he just alluded to, they are occurring much more frequently than they have in the past, and that's a very, very frightening scenario.
By the way, may I point out, the FAA is really accelerating those 333s. They are turning out a lot more than they did 6 or 8 months ago, and that's driven by the United States Congress. If you watched any of those hearings, they're all saying, "My God, we're no far behind Japan or China or Great Britain. Why can't we do this so good?" Well, they don't have nearly the traffic. If you don't have any airplane traffic, it's simple.
One of the things that came out of those congressional hearings was DHL is using drones to deliver medicine, and they use it within a 35-mile test area. Does that cause problems to the point about good uses of drones being able to deliver medicine, rapid distribution of medical supplies?
Well, it sort of goes in hand with the question you asked. I don't see the thing with Amazon. I swear to goodness, I've tried to think out far in the future. I simply don't see how that's going to work, because it violates what Representative St. Ange's bill talks about. In order to get that drone to that house down that cul-de-sac, he or she is going to have to operate that drone across quite a few people's property.
But actually, that doesn't violate the bill, because we do allow for the legitimate business purpose. So if you're going from A to point Z, and in between you have to hit B, all the way on down to Z, then that's fine, because your legitimate purpose is to get to that last point. But you can't take any of the information if you're collecting information. And that gets into another whole area that is not addressed by this bill, because honestly, your mind is only capable of producing enough scenarios. If you start putting all of those down in the bill, it'll never even get heard in committee. But and I will put it out there, one of the issues is, what about this data collection? Is this real-time data collection? Is this data that's being collected actually on the drone itself? Is it data that's being collected and transferred back to the operator of the drone or to some remote location? And what do you do with that data? How long can you keep it? Can it be, can someone else? The bill does address that if any data is collected. It doesn't say how, but if it is collected, it cannot be used in that court of law, unless the parameters that I had mentioned earlier. So, it's a fascinating subject. Positive uses, you said. So many positive uses, or someone had asked, I believe you had asked. There's so many potential good uses, as we both talked about earlier. There's the agriculture use. There's, the use by businesses for doing a number of things. There's the educational, the UK and Louisville and our other institutions. That, again, is limited only by the mind, the positive use, and we don't want to limit that. We absolutely don't want to limit that, but we've got to have some kind of set guidelines out there so people at least don't abuse it. They fall at least within some parameters. Again, this will be revised, I'm sure, in years to come.
Thank you.
Just one last question. We've fought back since the Afghanistan war started. That's where we saw drones, multi-million-dollar operations. What the military didn't tell you, though, is they lost about 10% of those. They don't know where they are. And they've got all the sophisticated guidance system that you can possibly have.
I'd like to say thank you very much to both of our speakers, Mr. Lackey, Henry G. Lackey, Assistant Commissioner for Aviation, our Representative Diane St. Ange on behalf of the Louisville Forum, I'd like to give both of you a token of our appreciation. We're glad that you're here. Also like to say thank you to William E. Barth Foundation that made it possible for two of our high schools, students from Eastern High School and from Ballard High School being here. We're so glad that you guys are here. We hope that you will come back. Our guest is here. Please come back and join us again. And I'd like to encourage anyone interested in joining the Louisville Forum to speak with our membership chair, Pam Greenwell, or visit our website for more information. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, November the 11th. The topic will be quite intriguing, and we anticipate, again, a great discussion. If you'd like to make reservations, please do so by going to our website, louisvilleforum.org, or by calling our voicemail at 329-0111. We hope that you'll join us for another enlightening meeting of the Louisville Forum. This session now stands adjourned. Thank you for being here today.